Juel, how are you? Thank you for being with me today.
I'm great, Hugo. Thank you so much for having me, and thank you for the hard work that you're putting into your project. I'm very impressed with everything you're doing, and I'm flattered to be asked.
Yeah, I'm glad that you're with me and Destino today. I really wanted to take this time to appreciate you, your work, and talk about all the projects that you're currently working on. Would you be able to start with your name and what you do?
Yeah, I'm Juel Bestrop, and I am a casting director.
And before we get started, I did want to share a quote from one of our mutual friends, Tony Sepulveda, who's also a casting director. He had this to say about you. He said, Jewel is one of the most dependable casting directors I've worked with. I know that if I hired Jewel for a project, I would not have to worry about anything because she's on top of every detail and she's also just the loveliest human being.
Oh, that's really sweet. I adore Tony, and I am very lucky to be able to collaborate with him fairly regularly. You know, he is a casting executive, so he oversees a lot of what I do on a day-to-day basis, as well as creatively get involved with ideas and just troubleshooting, etc. So he's a hero of mine as a professional and as a friend. He's awesome.
That's so great. And with that being said, I would love to know what made you want to work in entertainment.
Well, I moved here in a very long time ago, 1983, from the San Joaquin Valley. I had absolutely no attachment or connections in the entertainment business. And when I moved here, I needed to get a job, right? So I figured, okay, I'm going to Los Angeles. Entertainment business is in Los Angeles. I went to a what was then called a placement agency, and there was a job for as an assistant to a Hollywood producer who was named Samuel Z. Arkoff. And Sam Arkoff was a huge B movie producer back in the day when he produced a lot of the drive-in classics. I Married a Teenage Werewolf, all of the Beach Blanket Bingo, kind of the Frankie Avalon, Annette Funicello movies. He did a lot of movies with horror movies with Vincent Price, and he needed an assistant. And I was a young woman who had excellent secretarial skills. And it was my first interview. I arrived on a Sunday. I had the interview, my first interview on a Wednesday, and I went to work on Thursday. So I fell into the entertainment business, period. Lucky.
And did you have any mentors along the way or people that you learned from
Oh
early
man.
on?
Yes. I mean, working as an assistant to an independent producer who has such a rich history, I obviously was able to, he had amazing stories to tell, and I watched movies being developed and then made. And, having no education in the entertainment business, it was a great opportunity for me to sort of just be a sponge, right? And, I was there for a couple of years, and then I moved on and started working as a PA in on different films. I worked as an assistant to Don Simpson of Simpson Bruckheimer, who during that period they had just finished shooting Top Gun, and they had a lot of other things in development. So I was able, as an assistant, to then see what it was like to work with these, huge Hollywood producers who were sort of at the top of their game at the time. And every single job along the way, yes, there were mentors, but until I found my way into casting, I didn't have that sort of one person until I met Risa Bramon and Billy Hopkins, who were my true mentors as casting directors. Their first film as casting people was Desperately Seeking Susan, that you might remember, that starred Madonna, who hadn't done any acting and was just beginning her singing career. And because Risa Bramon and Billy Hopkins were theater directors in New York City, they became my mentors, not only professionally, but personally, with respect to how to work with actors, how to take an actor to a different place, and how to fight for an actor. And their particular style professionally and personally was something that I admired tremendously. And I was in at that point, and I was so lucky to have had that opportunity. Again, it was a very different time. At those days you could walk through a door and your life could change. People now are coming out of college pursuing casting careers. That was not a thing back when I started. So it's a very different time now, for sure.
What would you say was an experience that changed your life?
And a professional experience, probably. Oh gosh, that's a great question and a very difficult question. Changed my life. Probably casting the cable guy. Because that opened up tremendous opportunities for me professionally, and I will forever be grateful to the amazing Ben Stiller for giving me that opportunity because I had never cast a feature film, a studio film, independently on my own. I had as a partner with Risa Bramon, I'd done a couple of big movies, but I'd never done anything alone. So, Ben said to the head of the studio, "This is who I want." They questioned him because I was green. And he said, "Well, she's the one. I don't want to talk about it any further." He fought for me. I got the job, and that opened up the doors for me professionally with the all of the comedy movies I was lucky enough to have been a part of after that. Yeah, I owe him everything. Thank you, Ben Stiller.
I love to hear those stories, and especially to know that, there's that type of people that will champion you and follow you throughout your career. Of course, I've heard a few of your stories working with you, but what are some of the proudest moments that you can share with us about your career?
Proudest moments. I don't know if proud is the right. I think memorable and important. I mean, listen, I don't want to sit here and be a name dropper. But I worked with. I was lucky enough and blessed enough to work with Mike Nichols on Primary Colors. And when we were finished, and I sat in a room with this man who was one of the greats in filmmaking. And when we were finished with that project, he turned to me at the end of our casting session and he said, "You know, I've always equated a great cast to that of an amazing dinner party. You assemble a group of people that you sit around a table with, you share stories, you enjoy their company, you break bread, you hang out, and you have a wonderful time with these people that you're lucky enough to be sitting down with." And that really kind of that little tiny moment affected the way that I look at assembling a cast. You are putting together a family. You are creating this fabulous feast, this dinner party that you're going to sit down together with, and you're going to share your life with these people for a very long time, potentially. And you better get along. Hopefully, you fall in love with each other, as friends or otherwise. I've also seen it happen. There have been marriages that have come to be based on some of my casting. But I really loved when he said that to me, and that has stuck with me for a very, very long time. And then, of course, the other memorable things are when you are able to witness somebody getting their first really important role, or a young person who hasn't really had a tremendous amount of experience book that first job. There's nothing like it. They're my babies, they're my children. I want them to be happy. I want them to succeed and to experience their joy along with them. And to be a part of their journey is incredibly fulfilling.
And for you, what is it like to prepare for a project? And what are the things that you look for in a script so that you can bring that to the project?
Well, so the first thing that I do, I mean, it's in particularly, I guess this goes without saying. Okay, so you get a script, right? Somebody sends you the script. Usually It depends. If it's a film, normally the director will reach out to you, somebody that maybe you have a relationship with or somebody has introduced you, and they send you the script, and then you will have a conversation with respect to what the director's vision is, right? Because my job is to bring to life these characters on a page, and to fulfill this creative vision that the writer and the director have in their minds. And sometimes they don't necessarily have a real clear vision of who that person will be. Sometimes people are attached, sometimes they're not. And so you go through the creative process of discussing, having long conversations about who these people are and who they will become, particularly in a television series. Because the difference in casting a feature film versus a series is that in a film, you're telling your stories in, 90 minutes, 2 hours, whatever it is. So you've got a beginning and an end of your journey with an arc in the character. When you're casting television, it's as though you need to really think about where is this person going to go in story? How are they going to grow? Am I going to love them in the pilot as much, or will I love them more 5 seasons down the line? You want to keep watching. You need longevity with those actors. And I think that that's a really big deal when you're thinking about that. And that, of course, you are working with the writer, the showrunner in television to sort of figure out what that's going to be. The other big thing that I do is I do my research with respect to what has this writer, director, showrunner done in the past? What is their taste? Who have they worked with? Who are they? It's like what is their style? Information is power, and being educated about who you're working with is a really important piece of the puzzle, and something that the people that work with me, my assistants, associates, I really try to instill that in them. Know who you are working with so that you can create this wonderful piece of art together in a successful way. You need information. So that's kind of the beginnings of the creative process. I mean, and then there's a whole lot of other things when you're doing television that you need to do to prepare.
What are some of the things that stand out to you, or that you kind of take note, or that you allow so that you can catalog people in your mind of who's available or who might fit the role?
Well, things have really changed over the my very long career. I mean, when I started out, there's this thing called breakdown service, where when you start a project, you read the script and you make a breakdown of all of the characters in the script, and you write descriptions of the character and a little bit of what their storyline is. This breakdown goes out to the community of managers and agents who then send you their ideas, who they represent that they think fit the description that you've put in your breakdown. When I started, all of those came to you in envelopes, hard headshots, photographs. So you would have hundreds of envelopes that you would go through manually, and you would look at a headshot, you'd look at a resume. It was all done just this physical, looking. And you would also create lists from there was these books called Screen, that every year they were published, and Screen World would have all of the movies that were produced in that year, and they would list the entire cast of all of these movies. So these books, the minute they became available, everybody ran to French's bookstore, which no longer exists, where you would purchase these books and you would sit with these books and you would research them. This is before the internet. This is, you know, actors came to your office to pick up their sides. There was no faxing. I mean, it was all it was a much slower process. And you wrote everything down and you kept these huge binders of all of your notes, all of your sessions, all of your headshots. And those binders would just stay with you for years and years. I filled a dumpster with binders when I moved out of a house many years ago. So that you had this tremendous amount of paper. I mean, a lot of casting directors have saved everything that they've ever had and they have storage units filled with them, but I can't do that. Now, because we are in this digital age, it is much easier to keep track of and catalog all of the information and the people that you've seen, the people that you know that you like, the people that you know that you want to meet, and everybody you've ever auditioned. There's different platforms to track all of the activity that you've had in each project, right? So, in some ways, it's made it an easier process because you can access your information quicker. The other side of that is that there is now so much information, so many more actors that are being submitted to you because it's all done electronically. And therefore, though this should make it easier for us, there is a lot more material to sift through in order to educate yourself and make your decisions. For instance, in a television show, I just did a pilot, we put out a breakdown. It is not unusual to get on the average between 4 and 5 thousand submissions for one role. And so obviously that's very different than it was back when I started. And because I feel very responsible for all of these actors and the representatives who took the time to submit these ideas, I pride myself in going through everything. So that that is, as you asked, what's the process of remembering people and coming up with ideas, etc. It's a matter of who you've worked with in the past, who you know you want to work with, watching a lot of film, watching a lot of television, and going out to the groundlings, UCB, live stage, and just sort of being immersed in it because you never know where you're going to find somebody.
Yeah, that's great to hear that you stay, in the know. You definitely have to see where the industry is going and who is popular and who's up and coming. And
Right.
so, yeah, I really did get a glimpse of that when we were in the same space at the same project, and that was really fascinating to see.
Yeah, but I must say that when we were working together, things had changed in that we are now doing so many of our auditions remotely. People are submitting their self-tapes or we're auditioning over Zoom. It was just post-COVID and sort of late. I mean, we were in COVID for a bit when we were working together. So you never got to experience what it was like to have a casting office next to your office when you've got actors coming in all day long, because those days sadly are over. There's a little bit of it coming back. The last few projects I've done, I have had live auditions. But the business has changed so drastically for actors and for the creatives behind the shows who don't necessarily get that live opportunity, which they really should have, particularly in multicam, because multicam, it really is like you're putting on a play every week. And the nuances of the acting, the timing, the jokes, etc., really do play better in a live situation, audition wise, than having somebody do a self-tape. But we're getting back to it. We're trying to get the studios and the networks to do live testing once again. We just did it on something, and it was really interesting because we had young creative executives in the room who had never attended a live test before, and they were sort of like, "What do we do? Do we just sit here and laugh?" And I said, "Yeah, laugh a lot. Be nice to the actors."
And what is it like for you on a project on day one when you get to join them on the table read and you finally get them to say the script and deliver the jokes and really just kind of be a part of that?
Day one, when we're referring to day one as the table read, is very exciting and at the same time very pressure filled because I have seen probably hundreds of auditions for the people who are now sitting at the table, right? So I've heard these lines a lot and I know what's expected. And the table read is It's an interesting thing because it isn't really performance. It isn't really what it's going to be when you get it on its feet and you're on set and you're in costume and you're interacting with an actor in the scene. You're sitting around a table, you're reading from a script, and you're trying to give a performance. And all I do really is sit there and hold my breath and pray and hope that everybody is as wonderful as I know they are, and that they, as performers, aren't affected by the pressure of being in that situation. But to see it come to life and to see everybody together and to hear the laughter and to know that everybody in that room wants everyone to succeed and that your baby has finally been born. I mean, yeah, that is a really great day. I love that day, especially when it goes really well. Knock on wood.
And I've been lucky to be a part of this day with you guys. And like you said, it's very exciting to finally hear the script read out loud by the whole cast, and also for the producers to hear the script as well, with all of us there. And with that, I have a quote from Pixie Westbizer, who was our producer on Night Court. She had this to say about you. She says, Jewel has all the exceptional qualities of the best casting directors. She has the superhuman ability to recognize talent and know which actor will work in a role. She is an exceptional collaborator, a listener, and she gets along with everyone. Not to mention, she's the coolest kid on the block and truly lovely person and a pleasure to work with and know.
Oh, thank you. That's amazing. I feel the same way about Pixie. I mean, at, at the end of the day, as I said before, when you are working these very long hours and you're trying to come up with the absolute best show, the collaboration that exists between this team, this huge team of people that make it come to life is really important. And it's very important to me that I have a relationship that I'm able to be friends with, hang out with, and understand how everybody has a very hard job. What we do in this business is challenging. It's fun. Uh, we're really lucky to be doing it, but it's a minor miracle that a show gets on the air, you know, based on from inception to when the audience is seeing it. Everything that happens along the way, all of the different moving parts, every single department, everybody's got responsibilities and up they're pushing a boulder up a hill every single day. And we all have to be a team and we all have to appreciate everybody's challenges. And I get really close to the crew members, particularly in multicam, because in multicam, it's like, you start on Monday, you end on Friday, usually, and you're, like I said before, you're putting on this performance, this play every week, especially when you're in front of a live audience. And it's a community of people that get really tight, and you see each other, and you hang out with each other, and you're on stage together. Very different in a single cam. Whereas, like on Brooklyn Nine-Nine, for instance, which I was on, was it 7 or 8 seasons? They shot on stage maybe 1 or 2 days a week, but the rest of the time they were on location. And everything is just very disjointed. You're not shooting, in successive pages. It's all sort of, it's a very different process. And I, as a casting director, I'm not going to be going and hanging out on set or going to stage and watching them film like you do in a multicam. In a multicam, show night is a big deal, or the run-throughs. You're standing together on stage and you're laughing and you're whispering and you're trying to figure out what's going on and you're problem solving. And, you know, Pixie was my go-to person on that stage, as well as Tony Sepulveda. They were my we were a great team. It was really, really, really fun. And it hopefully, people are lucky enough to have that experience.
And I would love to know, how do you get the trust of the producers, of the showrunner, of everybody that's involved to give those final okays for casting?
Well, I don't have the final okay. But here's what happens. You again, going back to creating this vision, trying to fulfill what the writer has put on the page, making it come to life. And in comedy, making it, I want to laugh every time if it's good, I'm going to laugh every time. I don't care how many times I've heard it, right? So the trust in it's like anything else. It's like if you and I share the same taste in comedy. I mean, comedy is subjective. So I am not going to make everybody happy. But the people that have been lucky enough to work with repeatedly I trust them, they trust me. It's just it's human nature. It's like any other relationship that we're going to have over the course of our lives. And then people like Tony Sepulveda, who is an executive at the studio, I'm lucky enough that he also appreciates my taste. I appreciate and admire his taste, and he together, he basically looks at my choices and says, "Yes, Jewel, they're all great." He never says no. And I also then, on top of that, have a network casting executive who has to also agree with my choice. And the choice that I'm sending them is my choice as well as the showrunner's choice. And the director also in television will bless it or have a comment. Not always so much the director, but I like the directors to be involved because they're going to be working with them on set. So they need to have a relationship as well. Um, and I just think over the years, having worked with these network and studio executives enough, they know me and they know that I'm going to collaborate with them. I'm not going to put my foot down. Well, sometimes I do. Sometimes I have to fight for an actor that I will be initially be there will be pushback, and they'll say the studio or the network will say, "No, no, no, that's not the way we see it." Well, then it's my job to find a way to convince them and share with them the reason why my showrunner, my director, and myself think that it's the right choice. So I sometimes need to educate them with not only showing them the audition, but compiling footage from previous work of the actor so that I can, because an audition is not performance. An audition is a moment in time. It isn't what's going to necessarily happen when you get on set. And to look at an actor's body of work is invaluable. And I'm lucky enough to have worked with people who appreciate an actor's work enough to be able to see things in a demo reel that they don't see in an audition. Does that answer the question? I've gotten a little lost.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
Okay.
That's the intention, to recognize the relationships that you make with everybody around you to get that final decision made.
Yeah.
And that brings me to talking about the feature comedies that you've worked on, such as Dodgeball, Anchorman, and of course, you've got a lot of recognition from The Hangover. Can you tell me a little bit about what it was like to work on projects from that scale?
Well, that was a very interesting time, because that was a time when, beginning with the cable guy, we were all fairly early in our careers. So Ben Stiller and Judd Apatow, who wrote The Cable Guy, and I had worked with him on an animated show called The Critic at Gracie Films years before that. So I go back with these guys to sort of the beginning of time. And to be honest with you, for the most part, and this is an interesting thing, because this is a little bit in how the business has changed. We were able to make casting decisions without having a studio approve who we wanted necessarily. So the creative part that now exists, that used to exist, was a director in the room could say to an actor, "You've got the part." That doesn't exist any longer unless it's an independent film and you don't have somebody behind you saying, looking at the audition and giving approval. So when we were doing The Cable Guy, I had just worked on Bottle Rocket, which was a Bottle Rocket was Wes Anderson's short film that was shot in black and white with Luke Wilson and Owen Wilson. And Polly Platt, who was working with Jim Brooks at Gracie Films, saw it. She brought it to Jim, and Jim decided, let's develop this and make it into a feature film. So I worked on the feature film version of Bottle Rocket and got to know the Wilson brothers and Wes really well. So when I started doing The Cable Guy, I brought Owen Wilson in to audition for The Cable Guy. It was his first audition ever because he'd done Bottle Rocket, and he'd done some student films, but hadn't been in the sort of mainstream Hollywood situation. So I brought him into audition. He was scared to death. Ben Stiller fell in love with him. We cast him. We didn't tell anybody. It was like we just did what we did. It was like we would put together the basketball scene. We knew we wanted Jack Black. We knew, it was just like there were you just kind of it was a little bit more of a rogue kind of situation where it was more playful and a little bit, it was a lot freer. And I'm not saying that you still didn't have to go and tell the executive at the studio, but there wasn't necessarily this huge creative approval process where you had a committee of people telling you yes or no. So, when we did Anchorman and everybody came in and auditioned, including Steve Carell and everybody that was in that movie, it was just us in a room laughing our ass off. I mean, it was the best time. Hangover was so Bradley Cooper, Todd Phillips knew that he wanted. Zach Galifianakis, he knew that he wanted, but he still wanted him to audition. So Zach came in and did an audition just with me in the room, and I filmed it and sent it to Todd. And Todd was like, "Yeah, I knew he'd be great." And everybody else just kind of came together, and we had a really great time. We had an earthquake. In fact, we cast that movie out of the same building that we did Night Court. And we were upstairs in one of the offices, and there was an earthquake during one of our casting sessions. That was good. Um, but all of those comedy films, I mean, they just had a whole life of their own, and everybody, Dodgeball was crazy. Ben Stiller was one of the producers. There was a lot of things that Ben produced that he didn't direct, but I ended up doing them anyway because of my relationship with Ben. And it was just like everybody just came in and auditioned. I mean, I have Polaroids of, because I used to take Polaroids of everybody that auditioned. I have boxes and boxes of Polaroids, some of whom are very, very famous now. I just remember people coming in for the pirate role with, I can't remember who it was. It might have been Ken Marino, who came in with a parrot like strapped to taped like a fake one taped to his shoulder and like all in pirate garb and just kind of went bananas with all of it. There's some really crazy auditions for that. And oh, I remember there was a movie that I did that Kevin Hart was doing stand up but didn't have a film career yet. And he came in to audition for, I'm not going to remember the name of the movie. Andy Tennant directed it, and it was starring Matthew McConaughey and Kate Hudson. I'll think of the movie in a second. And there was a character named Big Bunny, and Kevin Hart came in to audition, and he brought a live bunny with him that sat on his lap while he auditioned for this part. So, of course, he got that role. So, those movies were really fun. It was very creative, and we just laughed so much. And listen, it was also hard and challenging, and but great memories. And I wish that those movies were still made. I mean, I've listened to a couple of interviews lately with both Ben Stiller and Judd Apatow talking about, that sort of 40, $50 million comedy movie isn't being made anymore. And so much of what we did back then, I don't even think we could get away with now. Like when you think about Tropic Thunder, which I didn't do because I wasn't available, but I helped a little bit on it. Um, there's just things that aren't necessarily politically correct. We got away with a lot that I just don't think people would be so eager and get behind, particularly the studios. Maybe if you made it independently, but
And you did make the transition into working on some of the funniest, great TV shows like you said Brooklyn Nine-Nine, New Girl, The Community. What was it like to transition into the TV world?
Uh, Well, it's it. So I have two children who are now adult, but what happens in television, which is great if you're a parent, is that there was, now things are a little bit different, but there was sort of a schedule. There was a timetable to when you would be working, when you would be off, and you would not necessarily, I think you would be off during the summer months, 3 months during the summer, so I could be with my kids. And the schedule was great because, you kind of knew what you were doing every day as opposed to a film, which could normally your job would be 12 or 14 weeks, but sometimes it took longer if you were doing like a big search and it just went on and on and on, and you kind of never knew where you were going to end up and when you would be finished, which was another reason why I left film because they were getting harder and harder to make. And as I said, those comedies were dwindling, the kinds of comedies that I had worked on. So being invited to the party on a television series was really appealing to me so that I could have that structure in my life. Um, but again, the transition was challenging for me only because of the way that I had once worked on a creative level where I wasn't being sort of overseen by so many other people on the studio and network side of things. Um, and all the other thing that happens in television, because I'm the first person that's hired, right? Before the rest of the production comes on. Um, you are also working with a showrunner who may or may not have written the script. Usually they are. Sometimes somebody else comes in. But you're also working with a team of writers. So some showrunners have a singular voice, which makes like this pilot that I just did with Carrie Lizer, very clear, singular voice, which makes my job easier, right? But if you have a team of people that you are sending auditions to, sometimes it can be very challenging to have a lot of different voices giving you feedback because they don't necessarily always agree. So that was a big challenge for me in television that I wasn't used to because I was used to having a director and maybe a producer who was creatively involved, and that was it. So tell it the collaborative way that television is made was an adjustment for me. Yeah, for sure. Big time.
Are you able to tell me about your current team that you collaborate with and what is it like to work with them and what makes them such a great team for you?
So at the moment, I very often for very many years I was in a partnership originally with my mentor, Risa Brayman. Then I was on my own, and then I became partners with Jeannie McCarthy, who is amazing, who is an incredible casting director. And then I became partners with Seth Yanklowitz, who was my associate, who then became my partner. He also is incredibly successful and an amazing human being. And then he went off to be a studio executive and he's now casting again. But so now I'm on my own, right? So what I have is an associate who I've had for, it's been 10 years-ish now, whose name is Julie Berger. And I've just made her a partner. We did the last few things together where we are sharing our billing as co-casting directors. And Julie is a machine. And what Julie and I do is collaborate creatively on ideas. We discuss things. We talk about, who we like, who we think is right. Uh, we have sort of different tastes. She's much younger than me, which is very important because she is going to be watching and be knowledgeable of shows that maybe I am not so familiar with, right? So she has brought to the party a different angle, a different group of actors that I might not know. Okay. And she is so incredibly on top of things to the point that when we were working on Night Court, because we start before anybody else, In early days, she was only communicating via email with some of the production staff that was starting. And when she finally came into the office and met everybody that she'd been emailing with, one of the people said, I swear to God, I did not think you were a real person. I thought you were a bot because you answered the emails so quickly. So she is kind of a bot. She's like, she's just there. So she is I can't do anything without her. I had to turn down something recently because she wasn't available and I couldn't start without her. And that was okay. That was the universe lined up and it was fine. And then I also have an assistant, Nicola, who is sort of the day-to-day, also creatively involved, but is also kind of the person who kind of is the glue, there's so much administrative work that's necessary now with respect to the way that we do our job and the reports that need to be done for the studio and the network, all of the paperwork, the contracts, et cetera, the organization of all of the auditions. So she's a team member that she's the glue along with Julie. But and she is younger as well. So again, we need the young people to keep our ideas fresh. On Night Court, it was so much fun because I, of course, was watching the original show. In fact, I worked on the original show for like 2 weeks as a temp, as an assistant to the creator of the show. So I've decided my career has come full circle. I went from being a temp on the original all the way around to casting the remake. And it was the thing that was great was that I remembered all of the old episodes. Of course, I went back and watched a lot of them, but I was really interested in bringing back some of those original characters. I went to the showrunner and said, there's this episode, here's the storyline, this is the character. He's still a working actor. Can we bring him back into, our new Night Court world? Wouldn't it be fun to do that? Um, I think in those terms, as opposed to maybe sometimes Julie's going to have something else going on that is a different kind of creative input. Our styles are different, our history is different, our knowledge of actors is different. So yeah, our team is works great together. And then of course, the team on each project extends to the studio and the network executives who I collaborate with creatively. And I treat them as my partners because I mean, a lot of people don't work that way. I work that way because I need them to be on my team. I want them to like the people that we want. I want to hear what they're thinking so that you know, they're making the show. They're financing this thing. They're the ones getting it on the air. So I have to be a team player with them. And I really enjoy it.
Oh, what would you say to your younger self? What advice would you give yourself if you were starting all over?
What? Oh, that's really hard. What advice? Probably to not sweat the small stuff. I don't know. I mean, and that just comes with age. It, I mean, my advice would be just to take a breath and listen to your gut, trust yourself. Um, I believe that I have a good barometer of what's funny, at least what's funny to me. And I grew up watching television. That's all I did. I was the kid that, you'd have to kick me outside because I just want, and this is back in the day when there's three channels. Uh, so yeah, that my advice, just trust your gut, take a breath, never give up, believe in yourself.
Yeah, that's great. And also, like you said earlier, about your mentors and how much information you were sponging all along the way, and also not to be shy about, reaching out and also being vocal about what you want to pursue.
Yeah, I mean, yes, being vocal in a way that and fighting for what you want and what you believe in. I mean, I did a show, I did the pilot of a series that's now in the air called Stumble. And one of the things that I learned from Risa Bramon and Billy Hopkins is that, and I think that this was because they were directors in theater in New York. If you believe in an actor and you just in your gut and your heart and soul and your brain, you just know that this is the right person, but the people who are making the decisions aren't seeing it that way, right? I learned that just don't take no if you believe that this is the person. So there was a big movie that Reese and Brayman did many, many, many years ago, and the leading lady that they really wanted, the director was not agreeing with them. Risa went out, bought her wardrobe, had her hair and makeup done, brought her back, she like sort of she packaged this person to be what this director was envisioning. And it worked, right? On Stumble, I'm not going to say who it was, but there was it's a huge cast, and many of them didn't have a tremendous amount of experience, but there was a lot. Well, yeah, they all had experience, but I mean, it was a very specific kind of casting because they had to be young, they had to look like cheerleaders, they had to have dance or gymnastics experience because they had to be able to do some of their own stunts. They had to, we were forming an ensemble, so they all needed to be able to play off of each other, and they needed to be interesting enough each individually so that they each stood out and had their own voice. You never, in an ensemble, you never want someone to disappear. They have to be a voice of their own and be different from all of the other people. So this one actress, we wanted her so badly. We knew she was the right person, and they kept saying no, 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 no. So one day I just said to the director and the producers, the showrunners, I said, would you guys mind if Julie and I did a session on our own with the camera and laid down our own audition with this person? Nobody else in the room, just us and the actor. And I basically did what Risa did. This person brought like five different wardrobe changes. She had all kinds of ideas about her look. We shot, I think there was four scenes she had an audition. We lit them. We put her in different parts of the room for each different scene. And we cut together this audition, and she got the part. And it was like the studio and the network were like, oh my God, we can't even believe that we're watching the same person. So you can't take no for an answer when you just have to keep pushing. The answer might still be no, but it's my job to fight for the actor and to put together what I believe is the best possible cast and hope that everybody's happy.
Yeah, that's my favorite part about what we do is just the collaboration and
Yes.
like stories like that to hear that you really fight for what you believe in. And it's also like you're just helping the executive or the producer really see your vision. And if they just need that extra help, you got to go above and beyond to do it.
You have to because they're just you have to because again, comedy is subjective and there are nuances that you can find that will surprise people. Maybe it's not what they expected when they wrote these lines down. Maybe, you have to always be open and creative to find something that's just going to be different and special and stand out and, create joy.
Well, thank you, Drew. I really appreciate your stories, your time with me, and I'm looking forward to all the projects that you have upcoming.
Oh, thank you. I want to just say that I am a very, very lucky person. I've had a long career and I've met amazing people, and I have been blessed to have those people trust in me, and I wouldn't change a thing. So there you go. Thank you so much. Good luck to you with this project, and let's hope that our pilot gets picked up so we can see each other all the time.